Now, our book actually concludes with speaking for social change. And I completely understand this because the power of public speaking is in changing our communities, is including people in the discussion. It is one of the most important aspects of public speaking. It's also one of the most difficult ones to approach because you're absolutely talking about potential conflict and arguments. So for this reason, it's something that we kind of cover in this final chapter, but we don't really go into a lot of the key elements or provide the opportunity to do so because it is confrontational and it can be difficult to do. Stand up for what you believe in, even if you're standing alone. This was a message from Sophie Scholl, who was part of White Rose Resistance in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. And what you actually find is that that is what it's about, speaking up. And at times you speak alone when you're speaking for social change or a small group. So let's take a look at some of the elements of speaking for social change. We want to look at some of the key terms because when you hear these terms, then you start to realize, okay, this is how they connect. We'll look at some of the considerations and some of the tips for speaking for social change. We'll start off with the key terms. Advocacy. That is where you're attempting to persuade others through a persuasive speech. You're advocating for a change, for something new, something different. And it always is directed towards decision makers. Could be your local government, it could be Congress, it could be the Senate, it could be your homeowners association. We're advocating for something that needs modified in the community. A social movement. We see this a lot more now. Social movements used to be a lot more grassroots and begin in small communities, and it would become a social movement. It would go across the group. Social has changed a lot with the internet and with social media. Now suddenly social movements can occur online out of that kind of grassroots movement into more of a widespread, almost a commercial type of movement. And you're looking at people that are sharing similar ideologies, similar political views, or a particular cause that they feel is important. In order to do this, to create an advocate for a group or to create a social movement, you have to arise the consciousness of the general public, make people more aware. You want to do this through civic engagement, where you are engaging people. You're engaging people on street corners, you're on the soapbox, you're engaging your Congress people. All these are civic engagements, and it is related towards governance of a social group, social agitation. You're trying to get people riled up. You're using some of the persuasive techniques we talked about earlier in this semester to tie into they've been wronged and there's something wrong that needs corrected. And those do rely on negative feelings. But the main thing is that you rely on negative feelings to get them motivated, but you don't leave them angry. You're actually looking at giving them a good solution. Is it going to be civil? Is it going to be polite and following social norms? Or is it going to be more disobedience? Is it going to be raising heck? Or is it going to be a polite conversation? If you're going towards civil disobedience, that's when you get the sit-ins, the boycotts, the blocking of locations. Solidarity is the feeling of unity within a group. And that is actually one of the key purposes of having a social engagement, of having speaking for change, is that you are not necessarily always speaking to the group outside, but your own group. You have to consider how you're going to get the message out there. Is it going to be a gathering of people, a rally, some type of organized meeting? Perhaps it's going to be an organized meeting. You're going to go to the Chamber of Commerce and you're going to have a heated discussion, we'll call it, where you're looking to change something, or you're going to a city hall meeting, or you're going to the steps of the Capitol. How are you going to get participation? Nowadays, a lot of that comes from new media. It's not the flyers like they did in the White Rose Resistance. It's not word of mouth. It is now through social media, creation of events through there to spread the word, to bring people on board that share a lot of the same thoughts as you do, so that way you can look at civil engagement and you can look at changing things within your community. Here are some of those tips. When we look at it, a lot of the work occurs behind the scenes. It's not just showing up and giving a speech. Matter of fact, there's a lot of work that goes into that. If you're going to have a group of people protest something, or you're going to have a group of people meet at City Hall, or go to a planning meeting, it's not just getting up in front of the microphone and talking. No, it might be, will there be a microphone? Do I need a microphone? Do I need some type of recording device? How am I going to make this function and work? You know, if we have 100 people show up and it's 100 degrees outside, how do I keep them all hydrated? What about restrooms? What about permits that are needed? This is all behind the scenes work. Not only that, when you're talking about speaking in front of the group, you don't want to just get up there and wing it. You don't want to draw from that shallow well. You want to draw from a deep well. So what you want to do then is make sure you're following what we've learned in this class for putting together a persuasive speech, putting together informative speech. How do you do your audience analysis? When you write your speech, do that rough draft, do the full sentence outline, create your speaking outline, do everything, practice, practice, practice. So that way you use the time when you actually get on stage to make the most of it. You've done the prep work. You don't want to get up there and waste that opportunity. Next, much of your activism is for the people that already support you. I know it feels like, oh no, we're really there to do engagement and talk and discuss. Rarely is that the case. If you want that to be the case, you have to design that in and do a broad audience analysis of not just the people that are showing up to support, but what about the people that may not be there, that don't support you? How will you reach them? Can you find the things that connect the groups together so that way you can build upon it and have a good discussion? Or is this going to be we're screaming at each other from across the street, which doesn't do a whole lot? But when you're really talking about true civil engagement, you want to start, how can we connect and truly share stories, talk, and communicate? You have to stay motivated. It is so easy to post, hey, let's do this on Facebook or on another social media platform and get everyone all fired up for it. And then 2 days later, you're like, God, that's a lot of work. All the work's behind the scenes. I don't want to do it. And it stops. Well, you just waste a lot of people's time. So before you take that first step, make sure this is something that you can stay energized for, because it's your energy that will carry your message. Very strategies of public engagement. You may not always want to do civil disobedience. You may not always want to block the stairs to the Capitol building. You may not always want to yell at each other from across the street. Instead, you might want to look at how can you vary it? How can you change it so that that way you actually reach more people and you do come up with the best solution. You're not just wanting to come up with a solution for yourself. You're wanting to do the whole Aristotle deliberative rhetoric, where what you're looking at is what is best for the community, not just a small group. Learn how to talk to the news media. Practice. This would be a case of looking at your networking speech and saying, all right, how can I modify my networking speech? How can I create a networking speech that would function in connecting to media? Getting the message across in a short, concise way with that attention getter, followed by, all right, this is what we're bringing, with that clincher at the end. All right. And don't set out to violate norms, because that turns off anyone outside of your group and will turn off people inside of your group. You know, if you can have a civil engagement, it's so much better if you can get along and actually get your message heard beyond your group. And if you're always doing disobedience, it's not going to get beyond that. So what we looked at in this very short presentation was we looked at the key terms, the consideration, and the tips. You know, I truly understand why the book wants to have this as the final one, because it is the power of public speaking. It's also a tricky one. I think there should be an entire course on this because you could go into so many elements. But for this, we'll tie it up nice and neat, and I'll give you that little clincher, that mic drop at the end. You should never let your fears prevent you from doing what you know is right. And that's truly what public speaking is about, overcoming those fears. Because by giving yourself voice, you give yourself power, and you can do what is right.